I've been a home nurse for about 6 years now, and in that time, I've had my share of strange patients in rundown homes. But nothing, absolutely nothing compares to what happened the week I stayed with Mr. Wallace. It was October when I got the assignment. My agency called it a temporary care placement for an elderly man in his 80s recovering from a recent fall. He lived alone on the outskirts of a town called Fletcher's Hollow, about 40 minutes from where I lived in upstate New York. They told me the job would last a week, maybe 10 days. All I had to do was help him with his medication, prep his meals, and check in on him throughout the night. Quiet area, my supervisor told me. Just an old farmhouse and some cornfields. Peaceful. Peaceful. Right. When I pulled up to the house, I could already tell it was one of those places where the silence didn't feel comforting. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath. The farmhouse was massive, 2 stories with an attic, flaking white paint, and sagging wooden porch steps. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s. As I parked beside the overgrown hedges, I saw an old man in the window watching me, his face pale and still, like a photograph fading in the sun. That was Mr. Wallace. He greeted me at the door with a raspy, "You must be Sophie," and led me inside. The interior smelled like old wood and something faintly sour, like mildew or rot. The living room was full of antiques, dusty clocks, old family portraits with cracked glass, and heavy furniture that hadn't been moved in decades. I asked if there was a guest room. He pointed upstairs but then paused. "Don't go into the attic," he said suddenly. I blinked. "Okay, why?" He didn't answer. He just walked away. I settled into the guest room down the hall from his. It was chilly even with the windows shut, and the walls were thin. That first night I was reading in bed around midnight when I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth directly above my head. I froze. I waited, listened. The footsteps moved toward the far end of the ceiling, then stopped. Mr. Wallace couldn't have made those sounds. He was too weak to walk more than a few steps at a time. In the attic, he'd said no one went up there. I wanted to believe it was an animal. Raccoons maybe, but raccoons don't walk like people. The next morning, I brought it up as casually as I could. He was eating oatmeal at the kitchen table, staring out the window. "I heard something in the attic last night," I said. He didn't look at me. "That's just the house remembering," he muttered. I waited for more, but that was all he said. The house remembering? What the hell was that supposed to mean? I should have left then. I really should have, but I stayed. Night 2 was worse. The footsteps returned, heavier now. Then came a dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. The attic hatch was right above my bed. I could hear faint whispers, indistinct, just murmuring. But they were there. Voices, too soft to understand. I barely slept. The third day, I checked the attic during daylight. The hatch opened with a loud groan, and a narrow wooden ladder unfolded. The attic was dark and smelled like dust and old newspapers. I climbed up slowly, flashlight in hand. It was empty. Just an old trunk, some cobwebs, and a broken rocking chair near the far wall. I almost laughed at myself for being so scared. Then I saw the footprints, clear as day, in the dust, human-sized, bare feet, leading in a circle around the attic, ending right where I had been standing the night before. I didn't tell Mr. Wallace. What could I say? "Hey, your attic's haunted." On night 4, everything escalated. I woke up at 3:13 a.m. to loud banging upstairs. Not footsteps, banging, like fists slamming the floor. I jumped out of bed and looked up at the ceiling. The attic hatch was rattling violently, like something was trying to get through. Then the banging stopped, and I heard something far worse. A woman sobbing, right above me. It was this low, mournful crying, so filled with pain it made my skin crawl. I ran out of the room and down the stairs to Mr. Wallace's bedroom. I found him wide awake, sitting upright in bed. "They don't want you here," he said softly. "Who?" I demanded. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "She's still up there." The next morning, I found a photograph on the fireplace mantel. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, standing on the porch of the house smiling. On the back was written, "Eliza, summer 1952. When I asked about her, Mr. Wallace said nothing for a long time. Then, in a low, almost mechanical voice, he said, "She was my wife." The first one, she went missing. They never found her. I asked if she had ever been in the attic. He just nodded once. That night, I locked my bedroom door and shoved a chair under the attic hatch. I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed with the flashlight, staring at the ceiling, waiting. Around 2 a.m., the hatch creaked. Something pushed from the inside. The chair wobbled. I held my breath. Then, it stopped. But I swear, I heard breathing coming through the seams in the ceiling. Heavy, wet breathing. And then, clear as day, a woman's voice. "He buried me in the walls." I screamed. I ran downstairs, packed my bag, and left the house that instant. Didn't even wait for daylight. I called the agency and told them I couldn't continue the job. They understood. I never went back. A week later, I got curious and checked the local archives. Turns out, Eliza Wallace had vanished in 1952. The official report said she'd run off with a lover. But that house, it still stands. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, I swear I still hear her voice. I've always loved road trips. There's something comforting about the rhythm of the highway, the way the tires hum against the pavement, the freedom of movement, the constant change of scenery. But sometimes I wonder if there's such a thing as taking one road trip too many. The one I took in the fall of 2016, that's the one that changed everything. That's the one I still dream about. I was driving from Denver to St. Louis. I'd done it a few times before, but this time I left later in the day than I should have. A storm rolled in just after sunset, this thick wall of black clouds that swallowed up the horizon. The rain started as a drizzle, then turned into a full-blown downpour. I could barely see the road. After white-knuckling the wheel for over an hour, I realized I needed to stop for the night. My GPS showed a small motel just off a rural highway, about 10 miles away. I didn't think twice. I just wanted to sleep. I exited the highway and followed a winding road into what looked like the middle of nowhere. No gas stations, no lights, just trees, rain, and shadows. Finally, I saw a flickering neon sign through the downpour. Riverside Inn, vacancy. It looked dated, like 1970s furniture meets horror movie set design. But it was dry, and I was too tired to be picky. Inside the lobby, the front desk was behind a thick plexiglass window. A short woman with dyed red hair and deep crow's feet sat behind the glass, watching an old portable TV with the volume turned down low. She barely looked at me as I approached. "Room for one," I said. She handed me a rusted key attached to a plastic tag. "Room 103, no breakfast. Check out by 10. That was it. I walked through a dim hallway with threadbare carpet and buzzing fluorescent lights. Every few steps, I passed doors with peeling numbers. The hallway smelled faintly like old air freshener and something sour, like wet dog. Room 103 was at the far end. The key turned stiffly in the lock, and the door opened with a low groan. Inside, the room was plain. Bed, desk, TV, and a closet by the bathroom. The walls were off-white and stained with years of cigarette smoke. The sheets looked clean enough, and there were 2 dim lamps on either side of the bed. The only decoration was a faded painting of a sailboat above the headboard. I was asleep within 15 minutes. Around 1 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No noise, no nightmare. Just a jolt, like something had pulled me out of sleep. And then I heard it. 3 distinct knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, heart pounding. But the sound didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside the room. Specifically, from the closet. I stared at the closet door, trying to convince myself I imagined it, that it was just the pipes or the wind or something else logical. But I couldn't look away. Another knock. This time, softer, closer. Knock, Knock. I got up, hand trembling, and slowly walked to the closet. I reached for the handle and yanked it open. Nothing. Just a few empty hangers and a small ironing board. The closet smelled like old wood and something faintly metallic. I was about to close the door when I noticed something odd. The inside of the motel room door, the actual room number plaque, said 104, not 103. I stood there staring at it, my skin crawling. I could have sworn it said 103 when I came in. I checked the key tag, still 103. I walked outside into the hallway and looked at the number on the door from the outside. Room 103, back inside, 104. I chalked it up to a maintenance mistake or a prank. I forced myself to go back to bed, but I didn't sleep. Around 3:20 a.m., I heard whispering, soft, rhythmic, like someone murmuring to themselves right by my ear. I bolted upright. The room was pitch black. I had turned the lamps off earlier, but now the switch didn't work. No lights, no power. The whispering continued. I couldn't make out words, just a cadence. Then it stopped. That's when I heard the scraping. Something dragging across the carpet, slowly approaching the bed. I was paralyzed. I wanted to grab my phone, turn on the flashlight, but I couldn't move. I felt pressure on the end of the mattress, like someone had just climbed up on it. Then I heard a low, rasping breath. Inches from my face, I screamed and turned on my phone flashlight. The room was empty. I barely slept after that. When the sun rose, I packed my stuff in 5 minutes flat and headed straight to the front desk. The woman was still there, watching the same TV. "Did anyone check into room 104 last night?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "We don't have a room 104, she said. "Just 101 through 103. You were the only guest last night." I felt dizzy. "Number my room." The inside of the door said 104. "I saw it." She frowned. "No way. Been the same since the 80s. Maybe you were half asleep." I left without another word. But as I walked to my car, I looked back one more time at the motel door. And I swear, for just a second, the number on the outside shimmered, like it was changing. It flickered from 103 to 104, and then back again. A few days later, I tried to look up Riverside Inn online. Nothing came up. No listings, no phone number, no reviews, not even an address. I even asked around in a few local online forums about motels off that stretch of highway. Most people said they hadn't heard of it, but one guy replied with a message that still chills me. That motel burned down in the early 90s. Room 104 was where the fire started. They said a drifter died in that room. No one was ever able to explain how. But every few years, someone claims they stayed there. They all say the same thing. The door changes. When my husband and I bought our first home, we thought we were making the best decision of our lives. It was a 2-story house in a quiet Connecticut neighborhood, built in the early 80s. Not too big, not too small. Just enough space for us and our daughter Lily, who had just turned 5. The house had charm, arched doorways, wooden banisters, and one of those old-fashioned intercom systems built into the walls. Each room had a vent with a speaker. The previous owner said it didn't work anymore, but we thought it was kind of cool in a retro way. We moved in during the summer. For the first few weeks, things were perfect. Lily loved her new room, we hosted a little cookout, and we even started planning small renovations. It felt like our dream home. Then, things changed. It started subtly. I was folding laundry upstairs one night when I heard what I thought was Lily talking to herself. Her bedroom was just down the hall, and I could hear her voice through the hallway vent. I smiled at first. Kids talk to their toys all the time, but when I leaned closer, I heard something else. A second voice. Lower. Male. I froze. I couldn't make out what he was saying, just a slow, murmuring tone. Lily would speak, then a pause, then that voice again. I rushed into her room. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the vent. When I asked who she was talking to, she looked up and said, "The man." I laughed nervously. "What man, sweetie?" "The man in the vent," she said matter-of-factly. "He said his name is Roger." That night I barely slept. The next morning I checked the vent. It was just a metal grill screwed into the wall, connected to ductwork that ran through the house. Nothing unusual. I even climbed into the attic to see if someone could have broken in somehow, but everything was sealed tight. Still, I told my husband, Eric, and we agreed to remove the intercom system entirely as soon as possible. We didn't want Lily getting spooked, but things didn't stop there. A few nights later, I was alone in the kitchen when I heard whispering through the floor vent near the pantry. Not just a voice, a conversation. I dropped the plate I was drying and crouched down. The words weren't clear, like they were muffled by static, but there was a rhythm, a male voice and a female voice going back and forth. Calm, almost monotone. I followed the sound to the living room vent, still there. Then it stopped, just as I touched the metal grill. No radio, no TV, no phone was on. It wasn't a neighbor. The voices were inside the vents. I told Eric again, but he chalked it up to stress. He had a long shift that night and left me home alone with Lily. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not heavy ones, just light, soft steps upstairs. I thought maybe Lily was having a bad dream, so I got up and went to her room. Her bed was empty. Panic surged through me as I called her name. I checked the bathroom, the hallway, even under the beds. I finally found her in the guest room closet, curled up and shaking. She wouldn't look at me, just kept whispering, "He said I have to hide." "Who?" I asked, trying not to sound terrified. "Roger," she said. "He's mad at you." I took her back to my bed and stayed up until sunrise, staring at the vent in the corner of the room. The next day I went online and started searching for anything I could find. Previous owners, accidents, anything connected to the house. And that's when I found it. An article from 1989. A man named Roger Bell had been arrested in this exact house for keeping his wife locked in the basement for almost 2 years. She'd escaped after he died from a heart attack, and the neighbors called the cops when they heard her screaming for help. The article mentioned that he used the intercom system to speak to her without ever going downstairs. That night, I unscrewed the vent in Lily's room while she was at a friend's house. What I found behind it still haunts me. Inside the duct, wedged deep in the corner, was a small cassette recorder, still running on corroded old batteries. The tape inside had worn down, but it played. I heard the following words: "You listen to me now. You don't leave. You don't speak unless I tell you to. I'm watching you. I hear everything." Followed by, "You're not alone down there. You never will be again." I dropped it and backed away, heart hammering. I told Eric everything. He finally believed me. The next morning, we scheduled a full duct cleaning and called a contractor to rip the intercom system out. They pulled out yards of old wire and strange modifications someone had made to the vent system. Tiny speakers, old switches, hidden microphones. One of the workers even said, "It's like someone was spying from inside the house." We moved out the same month. Rented an apartment while we sold the place. But here's the part I don't tell most people. 2 weeks after we left, I went back one last time to check the mailbox. The new owners had already moved in. I knocked just to say hello. A man opened the door, tall, mid-30s, smiling politely. His wife stood behind him, holding a baby. They looked happy. I asked if they were settling in okay. The man smiled. "Yeah, great house. Just one weird thing. Our daughter keeps saying there's a man talking to her through the walls." He laughed. I didn't. I just got in my car and drove.